Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make a lemon chicken leek soup, some salami and edam melts, and then we're going to prep our sourdough discard tortilla dough for tonight's dinner. Okay, let's start by getting our chicken thighs into our pot over here. So I have my water already boiling so that we can cut back on some of that time. And I'm going to put my chicken thighs right in here. And we're going to let them boil until they are cooked all the way through. The chicken thighs are great for making this delicious broth. And that's kind of the star of this soup. Put that out of there. So we've got our chicken thighs in there. I'm going to turn the heat back up to high. And then we are going to put some bay leaves in, 2 bay leaves into our soup. And I'm going to give them a nice crunch up and kind of really crush them into small, fine pieces. That way they'll let out the flavor a little bit more and then you won't notice their texture. So we've got our bay leaves going in here. And then we're going to put a little bit of ground black pepper. And this is going to season up our broth that we're cooking our chicken in. And a little oregano. I did about a half a teaspoon of black pepper, and we're going to do about a teaspoon of oregano and a teaspoon of basil. And this is going to make our delicious broth. And we will do a heaping scoop of chicken bouillon to season up the broth that our chicken is cooking in for our lemony chicken leek soup. And this is also going to get most of the saltiness in our stew. So I'm going to put that in there, and then we're just going to let these chicken thighs cook up. The chicken thigh is a fattier piece of chicken, which lends to a great broth. It allows that fat and the skin and everything to come out and really give you a delicious and nutritious broth. I always say thighs are the best for broths. Okay. Now that we have this cooking up and boiling, I'm going to put my lid on it just a little bit so it can keep in the heat and simmer it. And we're going to start on making our tortilla dough for tonight. So I got my little dough whisk, which is really great for whipping up the dough. And we are going to start with our liquid ingredients. We need 2/3 cup of warm water. Doesn't have to be super hot, just warm. It allows the liquid to incorporate better into the flour. And then we are going to use 1 whole cup of starter. And so I'm using my little jar of starter today. I'm going to give it a little stir. And this is a great recipe if you need to use a lot of starter. Most recipes call for like a half a cup of starter, but this one uses a whole cup of starter, which is just great. So we're going to I want to see how much is coming out of this guy. Yep, we have enough in here. I have a big jar over there, but I haven't used this one in a couple days, so I want to make sure he gets used. So we've got a whole cup of sourdough starter in here. We're going to pour that into the liquid. And I'm just going to use my little spatula here to get all that goodness out. And then we're going to put this to the side because we're going to feed him at the end so he'll be ready to make some bread tonight. Okay, we've got a cup of our starter in there, and now we're going to use a half a cup of oil. So I'm just going to take my lid off. I'm using olive oil, but you could use whatever oil you want. You could even use melted butter, but I find oil works a little bit better for the tortillas. So we're going to use 1/2 cup of olive oil. Shake it off. There we go. I think we're done with this guy. And then we're going to put in 2 teaspoons of salt. So I'm just going to eyeball. That's about 1 teaspoon and 2 teaspoons. If you wanted to add a little kick to your tortilla, you could put in a little pepper in there, a little cayenne pepper or some chipotle seasoning, and that would give you a nice seasoned up tortilla. But we are doing just the basic for our tortillas, which we'll be having with dinner tonight. And then for those of you who've joined us a little bit later, we have our chicken simmering on our stove. This is going to be for our lemony chicken leek soup that we're going to be having for lunch today, as well as some salami and edam melts. So I'm using my dough whisk right now, and I'm just trying to incorporate the water, oil, and sourdough discard as best as possible. I do know that, water and oil will not go together, but you just whip it as best as possible. Once you get the flour in there, it will be fine. Okay, so we have these whipped up fairly well. Now we're going to add in 3 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. So you don't want bread flour and you don't want self-rising flour, just good old all-purpose flour. So I'm going to put in, we've got 1, 2, 3, and then we need 1/3. So just a pinch more. And then I'm going to use my dough whisk to start the incorporation. And then we got to use a little bit of elbow grease to kind of knead it together to make our tortillas. So I'm going to use my dough whisk right here, which is really great. You could use a spoon if you wanted to, but a little flour everywhere. But if you are thinking about getting into baking, making bread, I really recommend that you get a dough whisk. It does make a big difference for whipping things up together. Okay. So here we've got a little bit of a stiff dough going, but don't worry. As the flour hydrates, it will get a little bit more soft. And once we knead it together, it will all form together nicely. So we're done with our dough whisk. I'm just going to push this slightly out of the way so I have my countertop right here. And we're going to do the first set of kneads into our dough, form it together, and then we'll let it sit for a little bit. We'll work on our soup, and then we'll do a little bit more kneading to really just incorporate it. So we have a nice, really flexible tortilla. So for here, we're just doing a simple knead. This is not like a biscuit or a scone where you have to do the press and fold. This is good old, like you're playing with Play-Doh back when you were a kid. We're just going to kind of take the dough and we're smushing it into our countertop here. I'm making sure I get all of the loose pieces of dough. And this is where you've got to have a good amount of elbow grease. Kneading, like with pasta, is really important for making a nice and tender tortilla, as well as making sure that it is flexible instead of like when you toast it up, it cracks. So get our good knead in and you see how it comes together. This dough isn't sticky, so it's not like when you're working with sourdough and you've got a little bit of a stick to it. And this dough is the discard. You don't have to have an active starter. The discard is just really, this is a great recipe to use when you need to feed your starter to get rid of it. Okay, so we're going to knead this up for a few more minutes. We'll put it in, and then we're going to start working on our lemony chicken leek soup that we're going to have for lunch today. So we're going to do, I would do 5 more kneads. Then we're going to let it sit and let the flour hydrate in the liquid. And then we'll knead it again in a little bit. And then we'll divide it up into our balls for our tortillas for tonight's dinner. Okay. So we're going to put it right back here in our bowl. We'll set it to side. And now, let's work on prepping some of our vegetables for our soup. So this is kind of, I will say, it's kind of like a green soup. We'll have yellow onions, but zucchinis, celeries, leek, and parsley. So there'll be lots of pops of green in it. But we're going to start with 1 yellow onion. And I'm going to just make a slit, and then we're going to take off this whole outer piece. It's It's easier to just cut it and remove that one last skin than trying to save it and peel off the brown stuff. So I just take that whole outer skin because also a lot of times it's a bit dehydrated and chewy. And then we're gonna do just a simple dice on here. Doesn't have to be too small, but this is gonna just add a lot of flavor to our soup, especially the broth. Okay, so I made about 3 slices across, and now we're just kind of squaring it off. Okay, we've got our yellow onion. I'm gonna pick up there, and we can see our chicken thighs in here are cooking in our broth that we seasoned with pepper, oregano, basil, and some bay leaves. And now we're gonna throw in some of our onions to help get that chicken flavored up as well, but also to work on the broth. Okay, let's get a different. I like my spatulas. I like my ladles for stirring up, but I like my little spatulas here for stirring. Perfect. And I don't like to add my onions in until the chicken has cooked for a little bit, because every time you add a vegetable into your soup, it's going to bring down the temperature. Okay, let's get our celery. So I'm going to start by just cutting off the tips of each one, and we'll discard them simply because when you buy them pre-cut like this, they dry out and they don't have a good texture. They're really chewy. So we're going to get rid of those. And then I'm going to have everyone, I'm just taking my knife right down the middle, and we're going to have it, and then we'll dice it up. Simply because I don't want to have huge chunks of celery in my soup, just smaller bits, but I do want the celery flavor. It adds just a lovely note to the broth. So we're just going to do a simple dice on here after we've halved our celery. There we go. And if you're using like the full stalk of celery, you need this would be about 4 full stalks, including the leaves. Always throw the leaves in. They add great flavor and also a pop of color. The leaves typically float to the top. So I always use the celery leaves when I'm making soups and stews. Let's give this a nice stir. Beautiful. So now we're just kind of mixing it all in because I want all my celery to go under there so it can flavor up. And now we're going to do the leek. If you've never worked with leeks before, they're very dirty. So what I like to do is I'm going to cut it up and then give it a good wash, because here, if you pull back each layer, you can see sand and dirt and grime. And even if they say they're pre-washed, it is always in there. So it's really hard to get it out without cutting it. So I just wait until I'm ready to use my leeks, and then I'm going to give it a nice good wash for it. So we're going to slice these up. I'm going to be using pretty much the whole leek, and then for our soup. This is going to add a lovely flavor. It's kind of got an oniony flavor to it, as well as a beautiful pop of green. So I'm just going to slice them nice and thin, and then we will wash them up really, really well, because if you don't, you will have, and I always say, it's not dirt, it's like sand. You'll have this just grit in your soup. So you got to make sure you wash them really, really well. And then we're going to use it all the way down to right where it gets to be white. And because that last bit of part is more, it doesn't cook up quite as nice. So we're just going to discard the bottom tip of it. Now I'm going to I have this pop-up strainer. And what I do is I'm just going to throw it all in there, and you're going to rinse it really good. Make sure you get your hands in it and toss all of them, kind of break apart all of the little rings. But a good rinse, because like I said, it is very, very dirty. I have yet to find a leek that didn't have a bit of sand in it or whatnot. So, and this one The bigger the leeks are, I feel like the worse offenders. But they are a lovely vegetable. Think of them as like a really mild kind of a green onion. Like they just have lovely flavors and a lovely texture when they're cooked up. Okay. There we go. Give it a good shake. Perfect. Now we have our leeks. Okay, so our leeks are ready, and this is going to be, it's kind of in the title. So this is our lemony leek, our chicken leek soup. So we're going to toss them in just a second, but I'm going to pull out a piece of chicken and see how it is, if it's ready for me to pull out. And then I'll take them off and let them cool while we work on it. So let me grab some tongs. The way I'm going to check is I'm just going to grab it out. I'm going to take my knife, and if it can cut through and it's cooked all the way through, I will know it's ready. So this needs about maybe 2 more minutes. So it's pretty much almost cooked through, but I want to make sure it's completely cooked through. That's why I always pop it out and check on it. Okay. Well, no worries. While we wait, we've got plenty to do. So in about 2 minutes, those will be done. Let's get our zucchini. We're using 2 good-sized zucchinis for it, and we're going to quarter these and then slice them up. So I'm going to take off the tips of each one. We'll toss those, and then we'll cut them in half and then half again. So we're going to quarter them. That's because you don't really want huge, unmanageable bites in your soup. Always think of when you're prepping a vegetable, how you're going to eat it. And with soups, you eat it with a spoon. So everything has to be able to be picked up on a spoon and ate that way. There's not going to be a fork and knife with your soup. So I always think about that when I'm picking like what cut to do with my vegetables. Okay, so we're just gonna cut all the way down here. Perfect. And zucchinis are lovely, like you put them in at the very end because they don't hold their shape well, but they're like little sponges and they suck up all of the flavor in your broth, which will be just absolutely delicious. There we go. Okay, we've got our zucchini prepped. Now let's go over here and let's start working on our melt to go with our soup. So this is our sourdough one of our sourdoughs that we baked up last night. This is just our basic loaf. We did a pretty striped design on it today. And let's see, where did I put my bread knife? We have another one right over here. We're gonna cut up our slices. We baked up our traditional one, and then we baked up a cinnamon honey butter one, and it was so good. There's hardly any of that one left. So I'm going to cut 4 slices off to make our delicious sandwiches today. We're just doing a kind of a simple sourdough with, I'm going to use edam cheese. If you're not familiar with edam, it's very similar to Gouda. And then we'll also have some mozzarella, and then I'm going to put a little bit of pesto on mine. There we go. I will say the one thing, I got this bread saw, and while I like it, the one problem is it doesn't cut well through the very bottom of the bread sometimes. So I always have to like turn my bread sideways. But it does, I will say it is good for sourdoughs because sourdough typically has that thicker crust. Okay, we're going to get my little butter paddle. This is my favorite. I love it. It's something that's so small, but just is great. It's called a butter knife, but it's like a wooden paddle. My best friend got it for me when she was visiting her mom in Sweden, and my family's from Sweden. And so she always sends me little Swedish things whenever she's visiting. And this is one of them. And like, even my kids are like, where's the butter knife? They can't apparently even use a regular metal butter knife. You've got to have this nice little paddle. But I will say it does work great for spreading your butter all over. So we've got a little bit of butter on one side of each slice of our sourdough. Perfect. My bottom layer, I'm going to do some mozzarella, which is kind of a mild cheese. And then we'll put our salami on it. My skillet is off. I'll turn that on once I've done assembling my sandwich here. And then I'm going to layer my cheese on. Just make sure you don't have your cheese go over the sides of your bread. Otherwise, it will just melt down on your skillet, and then you'll have burnt cheese. Okay. And so I'm always like, just tear it apart, lay it across. Before we do the next layer, I'm going to pull our chicken out because it is done now. And what you want to do is when you pull out your thighs, we're going to just pull that top skin off right away because that acts like an insulator. And if you don't pull it off, your chicken will stay really hot for a long time and it will be hard to shred it up. And we want to be able to shred it up in about 5 minutes. So we've got our chicken thighs out. Did I catch all of you? There's always one that typically hides. I think I just had 5 in there. Perfect. Now we're going to pull these skins off. Just use your tongs and you just kind of pull them to the side like this. And that's really important because it's going to help the chicken cool down really fast. If you don't do it, these things will be hot even after like 20 minutes. So it's like its little coat. There we go. Hot. Perfect. So you just keep them to the side. Now our chicken will cool off really fast.
You have a question. What's the soup seasoned with?
It has basil, oregano, bay leaves, some chicken bouillon, pepper, onions, and celeries. And we're now going to add our leeks in. We're going to let that cook for a little bit. And then we'll add some fresh parsley, and then we'll add lemon juice and lemon zest at the end. And we're going to add about a cup of shells. You don't need too much, but they help soak up that lemony broth on there and will be just delicious. So I've got my leeks in here and I've got a couple of shells in there. And now we're going to bring that to a boil. And when that comes to a boil, we'll throw in our zucchini. But again, zucchini needs to go in last because it's going to wilt pretty fast and you want it to keep its form as best as possible. Now let's go on to our melts. We're going to do a nice thin layer of hard salami. And don't go overboard with it because, first of all, salami packs a pretty big punch, like taste in it. So a little goes a long way, but you don't want to have too much meat on your sandwich or it prevents the cheese from melting. And then I'm going to do a little bit of pesto on mine because I like salami and pesto just go really well together. But my husband does not care for it. So what I'm just going to do is take a little bit and we're just going to spread it. You don't want to put too much on because it is oil. Pesto has a lot of oil in it and it will, with sourdough being a bubbly bread, the oil will kind of leak through it. So just a small amount. And now let's get our edam. So most of the time, edam, when you see it, it has like red wax around it or a black wax on it. And that's, we typically, when we buy it for our Swedish smorgasbord at Christmas time, we get like, it's a big ball and you get it that way. But here they've already peeled off the wax, but it is very similar to Gouda. They can't really tell much of the difference between it. And we're going to do some nice little layers across here. And it melts really well because it's a semi-soft cheese. It's not hard like Parmesan or even sharp cheddar. It is more soft like Gouda or mozzarella. Just, it has a good melting point. Perfect. And now put our sourdough bits on each side. And we're going to turn our skillet on to about a 6 to start with. And let's finish up over here with our soup. I'm going to turn it down. We've got a lovely boil. Once it gets to a boil, we can turn it down a bit. I'm going to give it a stir so none of those shells stick to the bottom of our pot. You can see it's a very green soup. It's just beautiful. And now, since we have a lovely boil, we're going to add in our zucchini. There we go. And this was two big zucchinis that we quartered and then sliced up. There we go. And then I'm just going to make sure it all gets tucked underneath the broth. Beautiful. And zucchinis are great because they're like a sponge. They're very the summer squash is like a sponge that just soaks up all of the flavor of the broth. Okay. While we are doing there, we can mince up our parsley. And then we're going to do our second knead on our tortillas and divide them in. But our parsley is something we're going to add at the last bit with our lemon juice and our lemon zest, because you don't want its flavor to dull out with the heat. So we're going to take off. This is a good amount of parsley, and I'm using curly parsley. I find there's not much of a difference in taste between curly or flat parsley or Italian parsley. Just kind of their look. You want to make sure you get the stems off, because the stems are no bueno. They're not good. They're chewy and they don't have any flavor. And this is going to be, we'll throw this into our lemony chicken and leek soup at the very end. And it's not, you can use it as a garnish, but we're not using it as a garnish. It just adds a burst of freshness at the very end of the cooking time. If you put it in too slow, it cooks out.
You have a question? You're making tortillas, you said, for tonight. Do you know what's for dinner yet?
Yes, we are going to do probably a chicken, like a fajita. Yeah, probably chicken fajitas. I have chicken and I have all the sides. We'll have guacamole. So I haven't decided exactly, but that's what I think we're going to do is chicken fajitas, and maybe in a beer marinade. Which always reminds me, if you've ever eaten at the restaurant Chewy's, theirs is a beer marinated and it is really good. So I think we might do that for dinner tonight, but it will definitely be with tortillas.
Another question. Do you know what sourdoughs you're making that?
We are going to make them tonight. And I think we had a request to do a basil pesto one, which I thought sounded delicious. So I think we're going to do that. And then I might do another traditional loaf, or I might do another specialty one. So we'll see. I'm trying to cook up a bunch of stuff before we go out of town. I'm leaving for Miami tomorrow, unfortunately. So there will be a little hiatus for a couple of days. We've got our parsley chopped up here. Let's get our dough out. Whoa, dropped it. We're going to knead it for just a second. I'm going to get a paper towel. It's a little bit wet there. And here is where we're going to knead, and then we're going to cut our tortillas up and form it into different balls. That way it will cook up nicely, or roll up nicely. Okay, give this a stir first. That way my hands will be free for a second. And I think before we roll them up, I want to just make sure we're ready to do it. Let's do our first flip of our sourdoughs. So we've got them melted, the butter melted. And the way I do it is because sourdough is a little bit thicker bread, I do two flips. So the first one is to just heat it up and melt the butter. And the second one is to toast it up. Okay, here, our dough, it's a lot more flexible because the water has started to hydrate the flour. So we're doing one last knead, and then we're gonna divide it up into our tortillas. I think last time I made it like 16 tortillas, and I think I'm going to make them a little bit bigger this time. So we'll have, I think I'm going to do 12 instead of 16. That way we'll just have a bigger fajita versus a smaller one. Less rolling out too. Okay. So we've got our nice knead here. We're going to do the kind of the press in. Now I'm going to go grab my pastry cutter. You could use a knife, but I find a pastry cutter works really well. So we want to do 12. So I'm just going to push down and I'm going to cut through it. And if you're not familiar with a pastry cutter, it's really just a really thin sheet of metal. And then we're going to divide each one in half. And now we'll just do in thirds. There we go. And you just kind of want to make sure your tortillas are all about the same size, but it doesn't matter too much because you cook each one individually on a skillet. So we've got all of them cut up. And then we're going to give them just a simple roll like this. And this is just so that when we roll them out later, it will be really easy to like make them into somewhat of a circle. Here's where I'm always like, you know what? You need to get a tortilla press because everyone loves homemade tortillas, but I can never roll them out into a perfect circle, you know, and I'm like, I need to get a press.
You have a question? Are the tortilla dough, is that normal bread dough?
It is, so not quite. This is 1 cup discard, a half a cup oil, which I wouldn't have put in regular bread, and then 2 teaspoons salt, 2/3 cup of warm water, and about 3 1/3 cup of flour. So it is not like a bread dough. It is, you know, it has a higher fat content, so it has a higher ratio of fat to flour to water. Which you need for kind of crisping it up on a thing. And we're not really, this is a great way to get rid of sourdough discard. It's not being used to cause it to rise. These will just roll out nice and thin, and then they'll puff up a little bit when you cook them. So, but these are your just good old flour tortillas. It reminds me when I was a kid, I joined my mom on a business trip to San Diego, and we saw like the in Old Town there where they had like little Mexican restaurants where they would make the tortillas in the window, and you would see like these old ladies rolling out and making the delicious homemade tortillas for the restaurant, and they just can't beat a homemade tortilla. Okay, let's get these last ones rolled up. Then we're going to shred our chicken, and we're about ready to finish everything off. We just have to finish toasting up our sourdough, our melts over there, put our chicken in, and then we're going to add our parsley and our lemon and lemon zest, lemon juice and zest.
You have a question? Can you post a tortillas recipe?
Yes, I was going to make a recipe card for that, and we can post it up as well. It's a really simple recipe, and it's actually a really nice dough to work with. You know, some doughs are stiff, but this one's great for it. And we'll also post the video after. We always try to upload our live feeds and post them on the link on our page. There we go. And then what I like to do to keep them nice and moist is I'm going to cover them with a little bit of plastic wrap. And this will just make sure they don't dry out. The oil will also help prevent them from drying out, but you want to make sure they are covered. And I find like press and seal works a little bit better than like a towel or a cheesecloth. Okay. Let's see. Perfect. Okay, let's get our last little crispings on here. I'm going to turn it down real low so we can finish off, but we have this nice gold or brownish crisping. Now, this is the messy part. There's really no way to shred chicken without doing it with your hands, but everything has cooled off now. So I'm going to pull out the meat or the bones, and then thighs are really easy to shred. I will tell you that. Thighs and breasts. And we're just going to put them, straight into our soup. Just like this. And if I find like a little piece of cartilage, which is, you'll know it's a harder piece, you just pull it to the side. But that's why I say you have to remove your skin, because if you don't remove the skin, these will still be like boiling hot. And we'll throw these right back in. Perfect. And pull this bone out. And Now, if you wanted to do really delicate, you could try to do it with a fork, but I just find there's the best way and the most efficient way is just to get in with your hands, get a little dirty for a few seconds, and then just give a good wash up afterwards. And luckily, the chicken is all cooked through, so you don't have to worry about like you're playing with raw chicken here. It's cooked. It's good. And then last one, I pull out my little bone right here. And then so I'm essentially discarding the skins and the bones and any like cartilage pieces that you might get. And then the rest of it is going in here. Perfect. I'm gonna give my hands a quick wash, then we'll stir the soup up. Okay, let's give it a nice stir. Beautiful. And then I'm gonna turn it up to a nice little boil. And I'm gonna taste our broth here, see if we need to add anything else to it before we add the lemon zest and the lemon, because this is when you're gonna get a true accurate of how much salt or pepper you might need. I actually think we're good. We don't need any more. Okay, so we are going to use some zest from one lemon, and then we're gonna use the juice. You need to zest it first before you juice it, because it is really hard to zest once you've juiced it, because there's just nothing firm to push against your zester. Now, I am using, this is actually a Parmesan zester, and it works great. It makes perfect little small shreds of lemon peel. Sometimes I feel some zesters are way too big. This is just a nice, perfect size, so you don't get stuck with any huge chunks of lemon, but more of just a delicious, light, fragrant bits. And I will say, I never use this for Parmesan. I only ever use it to zest my fruits. Okay, let's check on our melts here. Beautiful. Look at that nice golden brown crisp on it. Excellent. I'm going to slide it off because they are done. Look at that. Perfect. That is the way I love it. You want it nice and crispy. Okay, let's get this last bit of zest in here. So we're zesting a whole lemon. And this is going to help. The lemon zest is going to give a bit more of the lemon flavor than the lemon juice that we get from it. And now we've got I'm going to grab my parsley that we minced up. I'm going to cut my lemon in half. I'm going to see if there's any seeds. This one's actually not very seedy. And then I'm just going to go in with my lemon juicer, and we're going to put all of this lemon juice in here. Perfect. No. Pull, if you see any lemon seeds right up front, just pull them out because you don't want them in your soup. Beautiful. And let's give it a stir. And then we're going to pop our parsley in, and then our soup is done. Okay, perfect. Now, we've got about 1/3 cup of parsley, which is going to give us this beautiful, vibrant flavor, as well as another pop of green. But this soup is a very green soup to begin with. Perfect. Whoops. Spill a little over. Okay, I'm going to turn off my heat. I'm going to wash my hands, and then we are going to plate up. And we'll do our little cauldron today. So we have this is our hard salami pesto edam cheese melt. And then we are going to serve it. Let me get a beautiful, and this is our lemony chicken and leek soup. And the lemon just kind of cuts through, the acidity cuts through the chicken broth, and it just makes it so delicious. There we go. So this is for lunch today. We have our lemony chicken leek soup with fresh parsley and a splash of lemon juice. And then we paired it with our salami and edam melt on our homemade sourdough. Well, guys, we had lots of fun today. We made our sandwiches, our soup. We prepped our tortillas for dinner tonight. Well, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining us. I try to do live cooking shows as much as possible. I will be going out of town tomorrow, so we won't have a couple there. But we'll post a couple videos, and we'll be back Sunday. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be making our Mexican food tonight with our tortillas, so don't forget to join us there. Thanks again. Don't forget to like and subscribe.